We try to record this for those who do not attend, but sign up. Feel free, again, I'm going to repeat, to drop in the chat where you're from. That's kind of like one of these fun rituals we have. And again, we mix and match what we do. Today, we have Debbie, who is one of our partners and an esteemed colleague, that's going to share the depth and breadth of her knowledge in terms of ROI and how to manage call centers and how to manage contact centers, something that the Petrova experience is not a guru in. It's usually part of what we do, but definitely not where we came from. We are more at the strategy level. We're going to have Debbie speak for 30 minutes. Then we're going to try to have as much as possible time for Q&A. We usually have, again, two types of events. We either have events that are very large, we have many people and we go for bigger groups of people, or we do something that's more intimate and more tactical, that is more practical and more expert driven. For this specific event, because the topic is more specific to the field, we kept it to a smaller number of attendees. So do not expect to have 100 people in this waiting room, but we do want to really help our colleagues get better at this. And Debbie is just a phenomenal in terms of how she lays out her approach and her accomplishments. So for those who don't know me, I'm Liliana Petrova. I founded a small consulting firm in Brooklyn, New York, after finishing a career in JetBlue Airways. We are a small but mighty team of experts coming from the hospitality and travel industry, and we help companies both with culture and customer experience solutioning, from strategy to going and thinking about how you're going to ask a question from your customer for satisfaction. And I will pass the baton to Debbie, who will take the mic from me and speak for the next 30 minutes.
All right. Well, welcome, guys. I'm really excited to be part of this, and thank you so much for inviting me. One of the things I liked about Liliana's approach is that they lean so much into the hospitality piece, and I think that that's a big part of the story that's missing today. So how do you elevate past customer care, past customer success, and actually achieve that world-class level? And I think that that's a big part of the missing story. So just to level set you, I'm a senior consultant with another company, Eventus Solutions Group, and I manage one of the oldest retail companies out there. They're over 350 years old, and I manage their online space, right? Specifically the contact centers. So I manage 5 different contact centers spread in geographically different places of the world. I saw one of the people joining from one of the places, at Moncton, Canada, is where one of our contact centers are, so welcome. But I want to level set you at a very, very high level. So I'm going to start by kind of introducing you to 3 different types of customer service so that you understand the differences in the progression through each. We'll touch on one of the industry metrics that matter the most in the contact center space, and especially in like a retail environment. We'll talk a little bit about where things go wrong and what are some predictions that are coming down the road for 2023. And then we'll kind of talk through some actionable things you guys can walk away with. Like, where do you start, right? There's going to be some things in here that kind of helps you to learn how to think through or practice. And then there'll be a lot of things in the appendix as well, like a proper mapped out checklist with more explanations around them. There'll be even things for people who want to do their own outbound contacts, things like that for, service recovery, world-class experience, things like that. So did some of the work for you so you had some actionable things that you can implement. But just at a super high level, when you think about the types of customer service, you guys are all probably familiar with the most basic of them, and that's just customer care, right? Now, when you think about customer care, it tends to be very reactive. It's the customer showing up with a need, and then you're nice, you're polite, you help them, and you send them on your way. It's about meeting those minimum expectations. Where Liliana's expertise comes in and where our expertise comes in, it's kind of where the industry has been pushing over the last couple of years to go into something called customer success. And it's smack dab in the middle because it's a beautiful place for it to be, and it's so important. And the difference between customer care and customer success at a super high level is that it's got a combination of reactive and proactive contact types. Okay, very important. And it really leans into that empathetic problem solving piece. So feeling what the customer is feeling, their joy, their sorrow, whatever it is, but then very actionably moving forward to solution what they need, and showing empathy at every opportunity that it arises during the contact, not just once at the beginning, right? Now, this particular lane, this customer success piece, is also very focused on the customer journey. So it's very data heavy. It's very mapping things out if you want to do it in a manual way, but it's really understanding for every type of contact that that customer has, right, where they're at in the journey. What does it look like? Every single touch and process, and how can you streamline it, make it better? It's exceeding expectations. And then finally, there's the customer excellence piece, and this is where we all want to be. And the beauty about this one is that hospitality piece. So it's about adding value in interesting ways that's different, right? So you want to have that authentic connection. You want to have a level of compassion. You want to personalize the interaction and tailor the solutions to fit that individual customer. So don't live too rigidly to policies and procedures. Policies and procedures should be treated, I think, in most things more as a guideline, and that every now and then can be flexed into shades of gray, right? Because there's going to be times when you really should flex towards the customer a little bit more. So, but at the end of the day, that customer should walk away feeling like, man, Liliana's got me. I know she's going to follow through on everything that she just committed to doing. I am confident I can get that off my mental to-do list and not have to think about it again, right? There should be a high level of energy and passion and loyalty. All of that should ooze from the experience. So from a Net Promoter Score question, we're going to call it NPS. This is one of the customer experience satisfaction metrics. Now, your company, your industry, whether it be automotive, insurance, medical, call centers, whatever it is, should have some level of a customer experience metric. It could be CES, which is customer effort scores, customer satisfaction, CSAT, Net Promoter Scores, you can go on and on and on. In our particular instance, we choose to focus on NPS. And it's got some controversy to it, but it's also a very, very highly used, industry respected. There's a lot of data around it, so you could do comparables all over the place. It's basically coming to the customer and saying, hey, Mr. Customer, on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend us to your friends, family member, and colleagues, right? That customer theoretically will stop in the moment and they'll think about their holistic experience with your company and everything that they've done, whether they're shopping online or going to a store, whether they've had to pick up a phone and call you, whatever it is, and they'll give you a score. If they give you a score of 0 to 6, it's considered a detractor. It's not good. 7 to 8 is passive, and 9 to 10 is promoter. So obviously you want a 9 or a 10. And the way you get your NPS scores, you take that percent of promoters minus the percent of detractors, and it gets you a score. Now, to keep it super simple and not go into too much detail, I pulled a couple of industry averages to give you a benchmark of what's good. So if you think about e-commerce, they're about a 62. Retail is a 61, consulting's at a 60. And if you look at the red line on the right, that shows you that it falls smack dab in the great section of NPS scores, right? So this is a good place to be. It seems weird that something between a 30 and a 70 is great because you kind of think that you want to be on closer to 100. But NPS actually results in a negative 100 to a positive 100 score, right? So this is a good place to be. However, when you really want to get to that world-class space, you want to try and aim for a score that's between 70 and 100, okay? And how do you do that? So now if everybody is working on, oh, my screen just froze.
Okay.
Oh, excuse me, my screen broke.
No, we can also project. Don't worry about it.
There it goes. Thank you so much. So at a super high level, without getting into too much detail, I want to break it down for you real quick. So if a customer scores a 0 to 3, you can assume their level of care, the way that they felt, was that their issue was not resolved, right? And when you think about that, that's confusing because an NPS score is about their overall total experience, but you're talking about human nature here. So a customer doesn't necessarily stop and answer the question in the way that you intend it to be answered, right? They're very likely to lean into the most recent contact or their most painful contact that they've had recently, right? So every single contact that you have with that customer has to be spot on. And that's why that authenticity, that same message across the board, all of these kinds of things are so important, because they're the ones that are going to be weighing heavily on their mind. So they may have shopped with you multiple times, they may have done returns, they may have all kinds of things. But this one experience is going to potentially make them a detractor, right? So ultimately, a 0 to 3, it's very likely that, the person that helped them was disinterested, they weren't interested, they maybe didn't understand or take appropriate action. If they score a 4 or 5, this one is interesting because a 4 or 5 could mean that the last interaction or whatever, maybe they did a resolution and maybe they didn't. It could go either way. But there was some level of a mental impact, right? So they either had to put forth entirely too much effort, contact us too much, be on hold too much, drive the conversation, convince the other party of what it is that they need, something. There's some mental element, and it's prohibiting them from moving forward. If they do a 6, and I find this particularly interesting, there's a level of trust and safety, right? You were able to reach someone who was able to diagnose and help you, right? It's very possible that they took the right actions and completely missed the soft skills piece of having that personalized, empathetic connection, right? But even though their needs were taken care of, they still score a 6, right? There are very strong potential to be a negative word of mouth. All of the things at the bottom here are detractors. Fascinating, right? I mean, they got what they needed. When somebody scores a 7 to 8, their level of care tends to be pretty consistent. Right? This is really good news. They met the minimum expectations. They got everything done. The person that helped them was polite, but they did a 7 or an 8, which is passive. This means that their interaction or interactions, if there's more than one, wasn't particularly good and it wasn't particularly great. It was just kind of ho-hum middle of the road, but they got what they needed. These are the people that are likely not going to be loyal to you. Now, when you think about that 9, this is that one where that circle that was in the middle of the page, that really perfect space for it, the customer success. This is that empathetic problem solving. This is the ones that really care about the customer, they care about the journey, they're sharing your feedback so other people don't have the experience. This is where you get the loyalty. This is where you get that lifetime value. This is a beautiful place to be. And then a 10, of course, is going to be that world-class level. And this is where you're really, truly adding value over and above being nice and polite. And you're doing those hospitality elements. You're doing concessions if it makes sense, whatever that might be. So 9s and 10s are promoters. Okay, so let's split it down the middle of the page real quick just to kind of further simplify it. So the things on the bottom right-hand side are just basic customer care functions, right? 0 to 8. Whereas the top 2, the 9 and the 10, these are going to be your exceptional heart and mind connections. This is the difference that elevates you. And unless you know how to get in there and actually, execute on this, you'll never be able to attain it, no matter how hard you're working, no matter how great your people are, right? So where does it go wrong? So if everybody is working for that really beautiful desired place, they've invested money in the right people, success, design, technology, why does it still go wrong? Why can't they hit those elevated numbers and reach that excellent space, right? And it could be for all kinds of reasons, right? Maybe your strategy, KPIs, your outcomes are unclear. Maybe you have too much, too little, or unclear communication. Maybe your approach is more reactive than proactive. If there's an inconsistent experience across different channels, or the information is not the same from one person to the next person, are your priorities aligned to the customer experience or maybe cost savings, right? Now, if you think about foundational things and the evolution of your company being created over time, it's very likely that you've had lots of tools and systems and customer relationship management things layered in over time that all kind of work together for different reasons and purposes. Same with your policies and procedures. You create them over time in a fragmented way. But are things actually, doing you a service? Are they laying out a clear picture for you so you can make smart decisions about that customer because you know how often they've contacted you? You know how many times you've given them a concession. You know how much money are all of these things making sense, right? Now, when you think about the focus, is everything urgent? Are you chasing after every metric with the same level of urgency and on-firedness, or do you have a very specific process, right? And are you overly focused on policies and procedures and inflexible on that entirely? So you're not bringing that, authentic, tailored solution to your customer. What about touches? And especially in a contact center environment, right? So in a contact center environment, you get something that lands in that frontline agent's lap. They pick up the phone, they answer the text, they're checking the email, whatever it is, right? If they can't necessarily do something immediately, they might have to submit a case, they might have to submit a ticket, to request a credit, a refund, whatever, an investigation. It goes to this back office person who then has to stop and investigate it. They make a decision to approve or deny it. As soon as that say they approve it, they then send it to somebody else to actually process it, and then it goes to somebody else to send out the communication. That makes no sense. You have all of these different touches along the way, right? It's going to delay that customer solution, that resolution, right? We live in a fast food society. Everybody wants what they want, and they want it now. We also have different levels of tier access. Some people can see things that other people can't see, right? So think about all of that connectedness. And then, of course, there's silos, especially the bigger you are. Like in the contact center space, you've got the contact centers, the distribution centers, the stores, the marketing. It just goes on and on and on and on. And everybody is working passionately and really hard to do well in their space, but they don't always understand the connectivity of things between different work groups. And is what they're doing going to somehow trickle down to the contact centers in a negative way, and vice versa? And you understand. So when you think about, all right, well, we have an idea of what customer service is. We understand, some of the scoring reasons and what they are, and some of the things that go wrong. How should I think about a downward market, and what do those predictions look like? I pulled some information from CallMiner. I went to Forrester and did some research. Well, they've got 4 very specific things that they're focusing on. And the first one is going to be prioritizing the customer experience into their brand identity, right? Now, this sounds like a no-brainer, but it's really not, because only there's actually 80% of the companies out there do not do this today. Right? And if you think about how important this is, about 54% of customer experience professionals, they're not able to prove the return on investment, right? And if you think about what that means in a downward market cycle, when budgets are getting tightened, there's a level of uncertainty, there's layoffs, there's things that are happening, right? They're at risk to have their budgets cut or lost. Teams are going to get split up. They're going to get absorbed. They're going to lose their influence to impact the customer experience and drive that part of the business. The good news is that there's 20% of the companies that actually do this. Okay. Now, these 20% in those uncertainty times are more likely to be able to keep their existing budget or get an increase of budget. They're even likely to have a step up in their ability to influence. So maybe they have a dotted line right now, or a semi-adjacent dotted line. And now in 2023, because of the changing times, maybe they have more of a seat at the table, right? More voice. The secondary piece is going to be the innovation skills, design, data, journey mapping. So what I thought was interesting about this is that 4 out of 5 customer experience teams lack the skills to be able to do this, right? And again, this is about thinking about that customer journey. So in a contact center space, they might be calling for retail, to place an order, to check the status of an order, to get gift cards, account. There's so many different things, right? If you're not mapping out the journey and the storyline of each one of those things, of what's going right and what could go wrong, and how to crisp efficiencies and do all of these things, then you can't make targeted improvement, right? Because you're just not in the data, you're not in the weeds. And because 4 out of 5 of these teams lack those skills, they don't understand the data, they don't know how to pull it or correlate it or tell the story back to the people who need to know about it. They don't have the ability to zero in on making the improvements that they need, and therefore they cannot manage it. Right? So this is going to be a much bigger focus in 2023, the equipping of skills and getting people to where they need to be, I think. And then the third is going to be customer experience differentiation. Okay. This is about embracing transformative customer care. In 2023, those brands right now that are below average, the ones that are below average right now have the possibility to have about a 25% uptick if they just focus on the bare bones, basic customer service things, solutions, I should say. So they're getting out there and they're really working hard. They could potentially go up 25%. Whereas those companies that are currently top, they have great risk of falling, declining or stagnating by 50%. In 2023, because they've got customer service professionals. Remember, 54% of them can't tell a story, 4 and 5 lack the skills, because they don't have people in place to actually tell the story, to prove out return on investment, to justify why they should have budgets and resources and skills and all of these things. They're going to have great difficulty in adopting a transformative care. And then when you think about the final one, proactive service recovery, you'll hear this one called PSR. This is about companies shifting from that reactive to that proactive mentality. So how do you identify things in as close to real time as possible and then action them? So in the appendix, for example, I have a checklist. Like if you're in a contact center, and most contact centers are inbound customer cares or sales, they don't necessarily make outbound phone calls depending on your focus. Well, if you take those inbound contacts and you survey them and you really pay attention to the detractors and the passives, or even the promoters, if maybe they said no on resolution, but they still scored you a promoter, maybe you stop and flex and really pay attention to those right now. And you figure out which ones could you affect change on. Read the customer comments, read the history in the notes, read everything that you can about it. And if you can affect change in a positive way, at least 2 backup ideas, so you have somewhere to go, you reach back out to that customer in a proactive way to save the experience or save the relationship. I can tell you right now, we did this last year. It took, just by focusing on those most negative ones, the negatives, we're averaging like -40, -50. When we did this proactive service recovery and did it in that personalized way, and we didn't have to give away the farm to do it, we would, at the very end of that interaction, turn around and ask that customer that one NPS question one more time. On a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend our company? Some customers just flat out choose to answer the question because they weren't comfortable. It was a live interaction. It wasn't an anonymous survey, but that wasn't very often. Some of them still gave us a negative score, but the overall average of all of it, that team right now is consistently performing at about an 84 NPS level. Way smack dab in the middle of that world-class based on that NPS scale I showed you, right? Very well footed.
Debbie,
Anyways, there's all kinds of ways you
can I break the rule? I know I'm not supposed to interrupt you, but just because this slide is so good, I want to interject just for 1 minute, because literally the first piece you had to prioritize is going to be on our website. It's literally the stat that we're putting on our website. I can't believe that you and I read the same thing and extracted the same thing. Why I think this is, I want to kind of flag this for our audience, is some of the people on this call are looking at budgets. And I want to flip this argument a little bit for our colleagues to say, the other way to look at this is that unless you're willing to really invest a lot of money, don't start. So in other words, don't do haphazard solutions. You have to go all in or not start. Because what we are seeing, and what the Forrester also analyzed the same stat as, is that many companies will shut down their customer experience groups, but not because the experience groups were not successful, rather because the investment was not really structured well or big enough. So there is no impact. And we've been saying this for years. Now the data is supporting it. When we say that 20% companies do, that is really the companies that have gone and invested millions. And why Forrester came out with that is because they've been claiming for quite some time that if you invest in CX, you will have more value, that you're going to over-index in value as a company. But then they dove deeper into the data, and they found out that that movement only happens at the very top. So if you really invest is when you get that movement. If you don't really invest, you kind of fake it, then you don't see this return. And I suppose that's because many companies went back to them saying, hey, I don't see the return. What happened? You're claiming this. And that's why they went to look into what really drives this movement. So, that's in a very long-winded way to say, if you're going to go with a bang, how we have this like stealth approach versus big bang approach. Customer experience is the big bang, or don't do it. So you don't end up with people that are not trained, because you cut on training. Kind of like everything else on this slide, I feel like starts with the first box Debbie has. Because you cut on training. Well, now you have 4 out of 5 people don't even know what they're supposed to do. You cut on other funding, so then you don't have the other pieces that are needed. So I just wanted to flag that, because that's really important. So you don't waste your time, and you don't waste your CFO's time. Thank you, Debbie, for allowing me to interrupt.
Yeah, no problem. You make some really good points, and something else to pick up on is sometimes when you have these half-approached efforts, you'll sometimes see an uptick, but you don't always get it in a sustainable way, and it falls off, and nobody could quite ever pinpoint why it's falling off and what's going sideways, right? So there's a lot of truth to be said about attacking it wholeheartedly and very thoroughly, because it's going to show you what's breaking and what's not breaking if you got the metrics and stuff aligned to do it correctly.
Okay.
All right. So where do you guys start? So how do you get ahead of this? Now, I went ahead and started by creating some basic starter questions, and I just got a very small sampling. Go out and Google, but this is to get the juices flowing. So how would the customer describe your company? How would you want them to? You know, do your employees go the extra mile for you, and are they empowered to do so in a safe way? How do you go the extra mile for your employees? I mean, there's so many questions and things to think through, but really stop and take inventory of where you are, where your heart is, where your head is, what space are you creating, what culture. That stuff is very important. Once you start to get this groundwork and start to really flesh it out, find out what your priority is. Are you focused on cost savings? Is it penny pinching? In a contact center space, for example, a lot of contact centers are very focused on average handle time. They'll have little pop-up things on the window, on the screen, so the agent can see exactly how much time they've been. And nobody wants to go over because then there's consequences and coaching and all of these things, right? But does it really make sense to do that? Because what's going to happen is if you're focusing on average handle time and their last call was long, well, the next call or two or three, they're going to try and take shortcuts so that it balances out the one long call that they have. And they're going to be missing out on all of those super important world-class elements of building the connection and the rapport in an authentic way, right? Speaking non-scripted, having natural voice inflections and pauses, and and asking good questions and recognizing sounds that you have in the background. You hear kids playing, maybe you're selling a couch and you want to be able to upsell some kind of a warranty, right? So that it covers spilled juice or whatever, right? All of these important tidbits of things that you're going to be doing are all going to fall off because you're choosing to focus on efforts that are not customer centric. They're important in the long term because you want to respect that customer's time. But in the grand scheme of things, while you're getting everybody focused on learning how to shift and lean into that customer experience effort, that is where you need to be focusing. And when you pull out one of those long calls and you listen to it, if you find that there were ways to more efficiently handle something or to use a tool to get an answer or whatever it is, that's what you coach to. The behaviors of improving the customer experience, not the chasing of an average handle time number. It's not going to serve you. If you also take inventory, make sure you're paying attention to what you're focusing on. Are you focused on every single target that's out there? Is everything urgent? And then when you get on an operational review call, for example, are you going over 18 million metrics and holding them accountable in a really strict way to everything? Are you really focusing on what's targeted? Like NPS for us is targeted. That is the metric. We look at it morning, noon, and night all day long, very focused on what the customers are saying, what their experiences are like, right? So that we can be, and then what we do is we stop and we pick other supporting metrics that feed into it directly. Hold. How long are we putting on customers on hold? How many times in a single conversation are we putting them on hold? First contact resolution, repeats, all of these things matter. Now, something else to think about when you're thinking about repeats is if a customer calls you back or reaches back out, let's say maybe in a 24-hour window, that's usually because there's some kind of a trust issue, right? Did the agent or did the person I talked to follow through on what they said they were going to do? Maybe they're not speaking confidently with power words and they're not coming across as the expert, right? Whereas if somebody calls back, let's say maybe in 7 days, depending on your business, everybody's timelines are different, it usually means something broke. Maybe they didn't get their refund. It's more process oriented, right? They didn't get that callback that they were promised, whatever it is. So understanding those kinds of supporting metrics that feed into NPS, ultimate scores, are very, very important. Now, if I move forward, there's a couple other things, just kind of tidbits, right? So think about evolving. You want to get comfortable with the uncomfortable, get curious. You want to make sure that if you have strategies in place that you're flexible, right? And you can shift with the changing times and needs. You want to research other companies in and out of the industry, which ones are weathering tough times and which ones are doing it in a really successful way. How are you changing your message and leading in certain ways? You can't take what you're hearing around you and turn around and parrot it back to your team, right? You have to stop and you have to tailor it. You have to inspire them. You have to uplift them. Are you flexing to what needs to happen? And then when you think about building engagement, start to really stop and think about it from a lot of perspectives, right? Are you doing that cross-functional relationship, and what does it really look like in practical implementation, right? How are the teams expected to communicate back and forth? How are they sharing insights from one side of the business to the other? How are they holding each other accountable? How is one letting you know that they got a project on their radar that they're getting ready to roll out, so you have a seat at the table and a voice and understand what's happening, right? There's so much stuff happening. And with uncertainty times, you're going to have people that are getting laid off. Are you in a place where you can scoop up amazing talent and build your bench, right? How do you get in front of your customer and remain essential to them in uncertain times, right? Things like that. So what I have here for you is kind of a practical roadmap. It's a step. Okay. Now, if you click on the checklist when you're in slideshow mode, it's going to take you to the appendix, and it kind of has it fleshed out with a lot more detail. And within this even are additional links, right? So that it's got tools to the appendix. But it gives you a place to actually work from. So just for our purposes today, because we're very high level pushing through this, and I'm sorry, I'm talking fast. It's just 30 minutes is a lot to cover something so important.
No, you're perfect. You're perfect. I love it.
Lord.
And you're on time. I'm so impressed. I just really appreciate you, and you're so good at this. So would just love to hear from again. This is going to be one of those things where this is your time. We have 22 people, probably a couple of us are on the team. So just let's also, Debbie, I'll let you finish your thought, but let's start hearing from where you are on your journeys and what's on your mind.
Do you want to hear from me first or from them? I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I thought that you, oh yeah, so Rachel just messaged me. You guys can also throw questions in the chat. Rachel will manage the chat. That is my understanding is once you get to the checklist, we can email people these slides and they can go through them.
Perfect.
But I'll let you finish your thought and then we can move to Q&A.
Absolutely. So in your practical step roadmap, because I went over a lot of stuff that in a very fast way, and it's going to be hard to walk away and think through, oh my God, how do I implement anything that she just talked about? Some basic steps are to listen to the voice of your customers, pay attention, take notes, do the research that you need to, measure the information, map out their journeys, make sure that you have a vision, a strategy, your employees have a seat at the table, create that customer-centric culture, create the governance around it. And then you want to do this all the time in business anyways, but definitely in a downward market, you want to be proactive about eliminating spending and or reducing spending where it makes sense so that they don't pull it from things that don't make sense, right? You need to be prepared to have that conversation and to justify your place. Let's cut the spending that you need me to cut back 10,000, 100,000, whatever the dollars are. And here's what my recommendations are here, 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 and here. Let's keep it for customer experience because this is what we've learned from the journey and this is how we're going to prove that return on investment. And this is how we're going to get there. So get better at the storytelling and do it in a proactive way. Don't wait for it to come down the pipe. And then of course, when you go through all of these steps, you're going to have a list of things that you want to chase after. So you want to prioritize, you want to drive the return on investment. There's things like that. So there's examples in here. I won't go into all of it so you guys have time for Q&A, but of ways that you can be proactive about reducing spending. And there's also information in here about how to make some smart return on investment tactic stuff. Right. And again, it comes back down to the storytelling, tying it to root cause issues, collecting and analyzing all of that good stuff, and then proving it out. Right. So let me give you here on the right hand side, I listed a bunch of stuff to kind of help you think through proving it out. I'm going to think about a store. Let's say when you're delving into your NPS stuff, you're finding that there's one particular contact reason that's driving down all of your stuff. An example might be Wizmo. Where is my order? So a customer's calling you to say, hey, I don't have my order. Where is it at? Right? And then you're actually having to put forth some effort and you say, well, Mr. Customer, I show it was delivered on such and such date by such and such shipping carrier. And the more you start to delve into the weeds and the more you start to study and understand this stuff, you may find that there's some commonalities here, right? So maybe your shipping carriers, right, are not knocking on the door, they're just dropping it off on the doorstep. And that customer took the day off to make sure that they were home to get their package, and now they're mad, right, because nobody let them know and now somebody took it off their porch. There's a porch pirate. Or maybe shipping carriers aren't putting it behind a planner, so it's out of sight, right? So removing temptation from those unsavory types, right? I mean, there's so many things you can learn from it, but being that I'm in a silo in the call center, and I know I've got cross-functional teams, I can reach out to whoever manages the shipping carrier relationship. And I can have them with metrics in my hand that show how often we're getting negative surveys and negative phone contacts. For those who aren't doing the survey, we can at least measure the contacts for that reason. I can show them all of this stuff, root cause. I can give them recommendations how to fix things. And then they can go back and they can say, oh, wow, this is good info. Am I measuring any of this? Right? And then if you think about like Amazon, for example, they drive their shipping carriers to be a 98% on-time successful delivery. Are we doing that, or are we doing something similar? Are we not doing anything at all? Right? And if you start to measure and you start to do it with a level of accountability and regular weekend checks with this group, then you start to realize what they're doing to affect change, right? And now they're setting metrics and holding them accountable. They're changing the contract language. Maybe they're changing the shipping carriers in certain markets because they're finding that in certain markets, they don't have enough packages to fill up a shipping truck. So it doesn't make enough sense to go ahead and send it out. So they're hanging on to it until they get it relatively full, and then they send it out. And now people's things are delayed. So maybe it makes sense for them to get more clients in that market, or for us to shift to a different carrier. There's all of these provable things. So once you start to pull the triggers and fix things, you can then go back to your metrics that you started with, and you can pull those net promoter scores. You can check those contact reasons. Are you driving them out of the business now? Is it getting better? When they do score us on that reason, is the score coming up? Now you have provable metrics. These are things that your customer experience professionals need to understand when they're journey mapping it out and they're tying dollars and metrics to their information,
But
so that
Debbie,
they can prove it.
now that you're saying all of that, just kind of like from the reality of our clients, that's game back to your previous slide of investment, right? Because what we see is people go and say, call centers, here's the operation, you get the calls, and then that layer of an effort that you're talking about, to me, is an additional headcount. It can be in the call center, it can be somewhere else, but that would be a person that would analyze the data and liaise with the internal teams to close the loop. And what we see is that the teams that are across the board are getting like bare bones staffing, like literally bare bones staffing. So this value is just sitting there, not realized. And they do it when they stand up new operation. Then when they scale, they cut people. So to me, I think where I struggle is like how it's almost like they're almost there, and then they don't hire this one extra person to make these connections, and then it's like nothing really happens.
There's absolute truth to that, and I've lived it, right? Even with the company that I'm with now, I mean, God, I love where I'm at. There's some of the most amazing people to work with, but there's evolution of how all this stuff works. We had to do a lot of manual lifting, right? So as the leader of the group, you got to stop and you got to try and put the puzzle pieces together, and you got to start that conversation. And by starting that conversation with that cross-functional team yourself, right? You may spend a day and a half pulling numbers because you don't have somebody doing it for you and trying to piece it together, but it is what it is. Yeah. What the benefit of it, though, is when you are really good at paying attention and connecting leadership to what it is and what it took, and how you're having to shift focus from other high priority things to get this one done. But the return on investment is you just saved so much money because you just drove X number of contacts out of the business because you improved it. Now you're saving them dollars, and you're driving their customer experience skill up by X basis points. You're showing the value, and why, if you had better resources, more funding, whatever it takes, you could do that in every one of those customer journey metric areas. And that's the evolution we came from. We started off very manual, and now we've got this very heavy investment in customer experience. It's very exciting. It's very exciting.
I'm glad. Okay. Do we have questions, Rachel?
We have one from Julie, which is, when/how do businesses get NPS scores? Makes sense with big companies like Apple, but what about startups?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of your question. Did you say when do they get them?
So I
When
think,
slash how? Like
yeah.
at what, in what situations is it appropriate together?
And so because I know Julie, where Julie's coming from, because I know her personally,
Yep.
I'm gonna maybe just give you context. I think the question is more how young a company can start on that journey. If they have 30 people, 100 people, when is there a size where you should look at that? It's okay, Julie. Or is it something that you can start early? Is there like a minimum volume or something?
Oh, that's such a good question. And I don't think it's ever too early to start. The earlier you're customer centric and the earlier you're paying attention to the voice of your customers that you're trying to engage, the earlier you're going to be able to build an environment, especially in a startup. Because remember, we talked about a little while ago that very often companies are kind of built in a fragmented environment. It's done piece by piece by piece. We're going to start with this customer relationship management system. And now later we're going to layer in this gift card. And then later we're going to layer in this, right? And they don't all talk to each other, right? And then all of those kinds of fragmented environments and being pieced together over time are going to give you ridiculously important insights that if you're not tuned into them right from the beginning, you will not be able to affect change in the way that you want to or scale up in the way that you want to. Sure, you may have growth and things may go, but your potential is not going to be reached in the same way.
I also
And the
want to
ability,
add, one thing to add for smaller companies is that you can have this added value of co-creating with your customer. That would be so much better for you as a company, as a product design. So depending on the NPS is one side of the questionnaire, but you could also, as Debbie said, if you look at the comments, you can extract from the comments actual features for your product that can be an added value when you're younger. And on a bigger company like Apple may have more challenges to change design, but as a small firm and in the beginning, you're probably very nimble and you can just implement stuff. All right, well, I know that we have many industries here. Come on, guys, let's hear from you. This is where the value add is and the exchange happens from an industry perspective. Before I start calling on people.
I got another question.
Okay.
Which is, are some cultures more prime than others for developing cross-functional relationships?
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm thinking, you take it. No, all right. I think that it is one and the same. I think that being cross-functional is part of your culture and it is a good culture. So for me, it's not that a culture is prime or not prime, is that you need to work on the culture to become customer centric, which would result in people talking to each other. That would be my take, Debbie.
And I saw it from a couple of different perspectives. So if you're talking about the culture of your internal business, right, then it's the responsibility from the top down. Your CEO, your executive vice president, whoever it is, needs to be bringing all of these cross-functional teams together with an expectation for participation and customer success and sharing of information back and forth. And this has to be an ongoing, all of the time conversation. They have to create that culture. If that's not happening, then the culture between cross-functional departments could very well be differed, right? There could definitely be opportunities for one department not to want to work with another and vice versa. I also kind of perceived it in terms of, geographical cultures. For me, I'm in the outsourcing market, so outsourced customer service stuff, right? So I deal with customer contact centers in different parts of the world. So for example, if I have let's say my one of my African call centers, right? It's not natural or ingrained that they're raised with empathy. It's not something that they portray on a regular basis in their home lives and things like that. So when they come into the experience, it's a taught skill. And you all know how hard it is to overcome empathy, right? If it's not personally ingrained, right? And then if you think about another group, like maybe in the Philippines or in Canada, well, maybe it's a little bit more natural, right? So the experience and the struggles that you're going to have from a geographical, cultural kind of thing are definitely going to exist too.
Yeah, and another thing, because Rob popped up, he's a very dear colleague of mine from JetBlue. I think when we talk about cultures also, it's funny, even with our clients, sometimes they're like, oh, the culture of talking to each other. If you go in and you just set up a recurring meeting, and he and I did walk the walk where, I said, hey, let's meet every 2 weeks. You know what? In the beginning, we didn't. But then by the second year, we were. So it's also as simple as using the vehicles of an org structure, which is called meetings. Set up meetings. When you set up recurring meetings, it's going to take some time, but over time, people will start showing up and they will share something. And before you know it, it's going to work much better. We have another question that I would like to translate again from Julie, because I know where she's coming from, and I will not answer it because I already answered it to her. Debbie, I think where she's heading with this is, do you think, and actually that's an interesting question for everyone, do you think we should have different types of experiences in terms of the call center and responsiveness and everything based on what type of customer is calling?
I do, actually.
Okay.
And there's controversy to that. Some people want it to be exceptional for every customer at every price point and but I've managed businesses for very high luxury and stuff, and customers want to be differentiated, right? That kind of stuff is very important to them. So if you've got a client that's like, let's say, an interior designer, and it's their job to go into these people's homes and completely make over entire spaces, well, they're very likely, if you're set up in the right way, going to spend a whole heck of a lot of money with you, right? So excuse me, giving them special promotional codes or direct dial numbers to get to somebody who can be a personal assistant or more expert tailored is important. So even the general Joe Blow customer, if it's somebody who spends a certain dollar amount or a certain time, a number of years, I'm sorry, allergies are
no problem, no
right
problem. We can give you a break. We can read another.
Mold is killing me. Anyways, everybody wants to feel special. That's why all of these different companies that you do business with today, Kohl's, Macy's, everybody has some level of a loyalty program. And very often, many of them also have programs or efforts to bump people to the front of the line or to give them a special cue or to whatever. So I think that in some instances, that stuff is very important. I don't necessarily think that it applies to every single business and instance, though.
Thank you.
We've got another one from MJ, which is, in our business, besides NPS scores, the other score we have graded on is the adoption of technology solutions we sell to our agencies. We have great customer feedback, and we're building our processes and ensuring technology is continually improving. They're interested in any other ideas to help customers and make sure that they have successful adoption of their tech investment.
Actually, that's fantastic. And I think you should probably tailor the questions from multiple perspectives. And we even do it in the NPS environment, right? So you got NPS as that main driven metric, but there's other survey questions that are part of it too that drill down to not just from a company perspective, but down to an individual agent perspective. You can do the same kind of thing from the technology perspective, right? So not just from the functionalities, but how are you rating the level of support? And you can kind of drill down on it from different perspectives. Look for pain points. Where can we improve? What can we get better on? All of that good stuff. So I think that that's smart. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry.
No problem.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, anyone else? I know
I have a question.
Dropping. Yeah, go for it, Rachel.
So, I thought it was very interesting when you were sharing some points where you can take inventory just to start thinking about, your commitment. And you mentioned, are you going the extra mile for your employees? Are they going the extra mile for you? That is something that's so subjective and not really measurable. So how do you approach it from a more standardized perspective?
Oh my gosh, you're so right. That is such a hard question to answer because it is so relative and subjective, and there's so many ways to think about it. I think from one of the ways that I kind of tackled it is when we were doing this complete shakeup in 2022, and really, flip-flopped everybody's experience in every one of the channels in the way that we do business. We wanted to not only show up for the customer in the way that we needed to, but we needed to show up for the employee in the way that they needed us to. And a big part of that was shifting the conversation to teaching them to be business owners, to get into that business owner mindset. And then we started to engage them at every level a lot more frequently, right? So we would stop, and actually in the appendix, I gave you a snapshot so that you can kind of work through a lot of those questions. So like in the contact center environment, for example, you start with recruiting, right? What does that journey look like all the way from recruiting to interviewing to hiring to training to nesting to actually hitting production? Are all of these different people, right, asking, or participating in a way that makes sense so that we get the best possible candidates and provide them a cocooned environment where they have the fastest speed to competency so that call one, day one, that customer is getting the experience that they deserve, and not several days in or several weeks in, are they finally up to speed and they got all the kinks worked out. That's unacceptable. Those customers deserve the right treatment call one. And there's lots of different methodologies. But that's where we started, was getting them way more ingrained in the experience, more ownership in it, lots of breakout sessions and calls to demonstrate it, how they're communicating information up and down the streams, and taking their feedback for what is and isn't working. And I think one of the most important things I think that we've done, and we're still a little lumpy on it because communication is always a struggle for most companies, is that close the loop feedback, right? Yeah. They've bubbled up all of these opportunities. Are we full circle coming back to them and telling them what we've done with what they've shared? Are we valuing the hard work that they did to put stuff in front of us with recommendations? And have we done anything to it to make their lives better? Right? We're working hard to make the customers better. We need to prove to them that we're making their lives better. And it could be everything from systems, talking, you get it.
That's so hard. And I'll add one more thing here, because literally that happened this morning. We also have a client where we thought we did it. We had a regroup, and hopefully but it's not as fast as you think. Recovering a customer, I guess, what I mean? Like, you go and you're like, well, I'm doing this stuff, and they're like, well, I haven't seen it yet, and you're like, well, I'm still working on it, and it's gonna take some time. I just want to tell you we're working on it. And it's just sometimes, like, I guess when I read in books, they're like, oh, you tell the customer they're gonna be wild. It's like, well, maybe you got to tell them more than once, or maybe you wait for a little longer, but then they say you didn't come back to me. It's just kind of like, I'm seeing now that it's a longer commitment as everything else to do this.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Well,
but just like you have to, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I didn't want to explain. Yeah, go.
Just how you have to shift and make sure the customer is at the center of everything that you do. Will they benefit from us making this effort? How is it going to enhance their lives? Will they be appreciative of this? You have to do the same thing for the employees, right? You have to ask those exact same questions. So you can't show up at every meeting beating them over the head with the club, right? You've got to uplift them. You've got to recognize and do kudos where it's appropriate and do it in a meaningful way, publicly, proudly, right? Maybe implement an employee net promoter score where they have the ability to provide, anonymous survey stuff that you also delve into and action. There's a lot of different ways you can do it.
Okay. If there are no more questions, I want to use the last 4 minutes to wrap up. And because a bunch of people are falling off, and those who have a meeting in the next hour, they probably have to run as well. I'm like, lately, Debbie, I'm all about the bio breaks. I want people to have a minute to reset. I don't finish meetings on the hour anymore. So thank you, everyone. And thank you, Debbie, for coming. As next steps, you can, we're going to send the deck. You're going to see Debbie's contact information there. You're going to see where they come, where you can find her. And we are very grateful that the community is alive and that you come to be frank, that's to us, that's the big thank you. That means we have people that are interested in what we're interested and passionate about. For those who stay until the end, that means we're interesting enough for you to stay. And those who put their camera on, you're our great stars, okay? Alan and Ruth, I am like so happy you had your cameras, because we do need at least a couple of people to look at when we speak. So we appreciate the engagement here. And I wish everyone a great afternoon. For those who are wondering about the materials, we'll share everything. We're very transparent. And Debbie, would you like to say something?
Thank you. I feel honored to be able to talk about something that's so near and dear to my heart. I'm absolutely over the moon passionate about this stuff, and I have not always been this way. I am not a quality person. That is not what I do. This is not part of my job, but there was a gap, and the only way I can effectively manage the operational environment was just to own it, to step up, to make it mine. And it's created one heck of a learning curve. I've had to do a lot of studying and stuff to get there, and I'm so glad that I did, because it has completely revolutionized the way I think about the way we engage with our people. So it's worth the effort. Step up and do it. And just a tidbit, if it helps you, our email NPS score, if you look 2 years ago, was like at a -7. We are currently sitting at an 85 as of this morning.
What?
I mean, this is pretty exciting stuff, right? And that's just in one of the channels. That's not even all of the channels. So it's worth the time. I can't say it enough.
Thank you. Thank you so much.